Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to talk about a specific kind of concept when it comes to storytelling, and I've been doing it a lot lately, talking about certain kind of terminology and rhetoric and concepts when it comes to storytelling, specifically in popular culture, that is, with especially TV series and movies, extends to some extent also to music, and then of course also books and comic books. And I'm gonna talk about archetypes. That is a specific kind of character that we very easily feel for. And that can be, for instance, a hero. But that can also be a villain. And that sometimes there's also something in between. And I want to talk about that specific kind of concept where a villain might do a good thing and a good guy might do a bad thing. And this is from a concept that we know as the antihero. And I'm gonna start talking about that in a moment. But first, I'd like to inform you that you can like this video. You can also subscribe to the channel if you like. You can share this with friends and family or people at work or just here online as well. You can also comment away in the comment section if you like. And also important for you to know is that I'm not a native English speaker, and so on occasion I might still fumble a word or mispronounce something, and that is completely normal. Okay, let's start talking about anti-heroes and the other gray zone part where good guys do bad things and bad guys do good things. And obviously, I've been talking about this quite a lot, this storytelling kind of aspect. I've also talked a lot about superheroes. I'm gonna bring up some examples, especially from the superhero genre, because not only are they an interesting place to go to, they're also just massively popular these days. And there's a lot of ways to go to here. But what I first want to do is give you the definition so you can understand for yourself what it is. So I'm gonna read here for a moment. So first and foremost, anti-hero is a kind of archetype character. And an archetype character is a universal, recognizable, fictional character whose patterns of behavior represent fundamental human motivations and roles that tap into the collective unconscious. And these are original models that provide a familiar template for readers and audiences to instantly connect with. And, you know, especially those. Well, since I'm not just talking about anti-heroes, also requires to talk about heroes and villains, of course, as I said at the beginning. And for instance, one of those heroes, the most popular ones, occasionally also have a dark side. And it's a little pun intended in case you're visiting me from the DC Universe side, because there's a literal villain called Darkseid. And of course, he faces off with these two a lot, Batman and Superman, especially Superman, because he's mostly from his corner of that universe. But then if you have seen those DCEU movies, when it's all about with the Justice League, you know that it shows up there. And But that is a kind of villain dark side, as far as I know, because I haven't seen those DCEU movies, especially the Justice League ones. That is very much a no bend kind of character, like very stuck in his ways. And but I'm gonna also talk because it's such a spectrum, basically, from heroes to villains, from good to bad, from light to darkness, and I'm gonna do that in a moment. Well, since I'm talking about DC already, let's start there. One of your most interesting popular characters right now is a very interesting character that I recently saw a movie of. In fact, one of my favorite DC verse or universe movie. And of course, I'm talking about Harley Quinn. And she has been in the picture in pop culture for quite some time now. She's been introduced in the 10s, I believe, especially on the big screen, with people like Margot Robbie and Kaylee Cuoco playing her in both live action and animation, and then also in games as well, because she appears in the Arkham video games. And to give you a bit of a backstory on Harley Quinn, real name is Harleen Quinzel, of course. She was a psychiatrist in a prison. She actually says her backstory in the movie I watched to prepare for this concept. In the Birds of Prey movie, she has this conversation with Cassandra Cain in a supermarket, I'll say. And she basically tells what happened between her and the Joker and where she's at right now. Being where I started just a moment ago, with her becoming a psychiatrist, learning about the Joker in prison, falling madly in love with him, doing the most impossible, maddening things for him, trying to get his attention, trying to get his love, and then ultimately falling out of love and having to deal with the complexities of our world, her world in that case, that it is not that simple. For instance, in her case, to be a woman and a villain and also have to carry yourself without a man in your life. And so that's a very interesting concept when it comes to a female villain. And also, the reason why I'm saying this is because I want more of those. There has always been a lot of male villains in either side, both the DC universe and in Marvel as well, which I'm gonna talk about in moments too. And on occasion, I do mind a female villain. For instance, there's the Snow White movie from Disney initially, where you have that transformation of the evil queen into that hag, which used to bring nightmares to me when I was younger. So, and the key thing there is that if you do it well, you can have a very cool villain. Or in this case, also an anti-hero. Because in the Birds of Prey movie, Harley Quinn is still mostly very much a villainous character, but on occasion does feel the urge or the power to do something for good for once. Because kind of when you're trying things that you're not used to, you start to feel what it does to you which makes you lose to actually doing those things. And so, for those reasons, a character like Harley Quinn is a very interesting one, especially because also part of it is the outfits and the looks of those characters. And she's a very colorful character, of course, choosing between the blue and the red and the white, of course, too, of her skin, which is a side effect that she has had to do because of her transformation, doing the same things that the Joker initially had happened in his backstory, which was getting through a chemical sludge which made him change. In fact, the last line, part of the last line of that movie of Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn is "Call me a big softy." And I hope I said that right. Kind of sounded New Jerseyan and Russian at the same time. So I'm sorry if I offended anyone with that. Okay. I feel that's enough about DC for a moment. Let's talk about Marvel. And I said that sometimes villainous people do good things because they start to feel an urge or because they're in an environment that allows them to breathe for a moment because they're not stuck to, literally in Harley Quinn's case, a toxic character like the Joker. So let's start talking about Marvel, and I want to talk about maybe the most interesting character from the MCU. And I did choose a comics version of him, and I think a lot of the stands are also gonna love this. The Winter Soldier, aka Bucky Barnes, James Buchanan Barnes. And this is a comics version of him, of course. But initially we learn of Bucky as the Winter Soldier, a assassin from Hydra that has been killing and assassinating people for years on end, brainwashed to do his job. And he's arguably one of the most interesting and most talked about characters in the MCU. And he's got a crazy character arc that I'm suspecting is gonna end in those last Avengers movies that we're gonna get in a year and a year later. Of course, he was also incredibly cool in that Thunderbolts movie that has been out for some time now too, which I did a review. Well, I talked about the movie, and you can go look that up after this video if you want. And also, well, he goes through a whole change throughout the MCU. I'm gonna show him again because this is such not just an interesting character and a cool character, but in terms of character development, he changes a lot from, and I've talked about this ad nauseum when I tackled the Captain America franchise, because of course initially a sidekick and a ally to Steve Rogers as Captain America, Bucky has really become a character unto himself, who is still very capable, even after losing everything. His best friend, his arm, of course, as you can see in this picture. Of course, this is the original version, so it's just an iron arm in this case. And so much more. And friends and family and all of that. And obviously you have those two amazing movies, the Winter Soldier movie and Civil War are about him. And also, there's that element of being brainwashed. If you are told over and over and over that you need to go and kill your best friend, something snaps in you. Which, and I'm talking fictionally here, of course, because that can't happen in real life. You can get brainwashed, of course. I'm not gonna get into what that means politically, of course, right now. But on the fictional side, that's an interesting part in and of itself, because it can be overridden, as we see happen in the MCU. And Bucky ultimately becomes an anti-hero. Through all his trials and tribulations, he becomes an anti-hero. Or heck, maybe even a hero. Because he keeps making those decisions and acts in the way that he does, that we see him in all his glory. This is one of those characters that we just can't get enough of. Maybe partly because he is portrayed so well by Sebastian Stan. And that makes for a very interesting story to see and talk about as well. And the question is, what is going to happen to him in the next couple of stories when it comes to the MCU? Let's talk about another character whose movie I recently watched to prepare for this podcast episode. I said sometimes a villain can do good things. That's both with Harley Quinn and with Bucky, or in his case, even not just becomes an anti-hero, but a legitimate hero in of itself. Sometimes you have heroes that do bad things for good things' sake. And the movie I watched for this is the second one from this lady, Captain Marvel. In other words, The Marvels is the movie that I mean, of course. And before anybody starts, by the way, about how they felt about that movie or the cast and all of that, I enjoyed it to hell. And it is one of my most watched MCU movies because it's pretty good. I'm not going to say it's incredible, but it's still a pretty great movie. I'm contrasting it a bit. Like, it's between good and great. So, pretty good. And so in the Marvels, Carol, we learn, has taken out the Supreme Intelligence, which leads to the decline of the Kree, and she is in some way punished for that throughout this movie. But she also faces a lot of odds in her case and against her as well. Also, interesting thing to point here out is that, especially in this gray zone between heroes and villains, you can be all-powerful like Captain Marvel because she has light-based powers granted to her in the MCU via one of the Infinity Stones, which gives her godlike powers and allows her to fly faster than the speed of sound, basically. Which leads to some epic moments in the Avengers Endgame movie. And Infinity War, too. Hold up. She's not in that movie. Excuse me. But what I especially mean here is that Harley Quinn is basically basically like a street level person, while Bucky is more of a spy assassin kind of figure. While she, Captain Marvel, is very much a on par with like Thor and the Hulk, like tank kind of individual, like OP. We often say about those kind of sort of characters, overpowered, and she definitely is. But I feel like in the movie with the Marvels, they handled that pretty well. Also, those action scenes are pretty freaking amazing. They're choreographed very well, and it clearly shows that sometimes a hero does a good thing. Sorry, thinks they're doing a good thing, but initially ends up being a bad thing, despite them trying to do something for the greater good. They're greater good. Little joke in there, right? And so that clearly shows that heroes have flaws, and they do mistakes, and they have faults, and they work and try to work through all of that. And that is what makes them human. Which brings me back to another figure that I want to talk about when it comes to being overpowered, of course. And it can be only this guy, Superman himself. Obviously, I did talk about the Superman movie recently, which you can check out when you want on the channel. And I thought David Cornswet did that incredibly well in that movie. And the thing about Superman and the fact that I'm talking about the gray zone is that he has his bad days and his he has his bad days. He has his mood swings occasionally. For him, when it comes to Superman, that tends to happen when there's a different kind of kryptonite involved, of course. I know green is the most painful one. There's other versions. You got yellow, you got red, you got a pink one too, I think. I don't know exactly what those are, but I know that they don't bring out the best in him or her in Supergirl's version. Because that's the ones I'm thinking about, because as I said in my video about Superman, that was the very first movie I saw with him. Before it was just stuff from the Arrowverse. And I did a lot of kryptonite stuff in there, of course, which worked, I feel. And yeah, I was saying, so he's very much overpowered. He has a lot of abilities that he has. And when he's not in a good mood or has a bad day or does mistakes, he's a menace to deal with. So it can sometimes takes extreme measures to take on extreme threats. And of course, when we're talking about DC, now again, it means that sometimes you have to do bad things to your friends. And when it comes to DC, and especially to Justice League, there is no denying that Batman is the one that has to come up with those ideas, as far as I know, of course. And he has those. I've heard of him having certain kind of protocols. The Babel protocol, I believe it is, where he has a contingency for if his teammates go evil, or, like I said, in Superman's case, something in between or something else as well. Because if I'm remembering well from the Arrowverse, there's also some lusty aspects. Of course, that's another aspect where being bad or good can also come out is when you're in heat. Is a different way to say it. And that applies to many characters. I think someone especially know. I think someone that we especially know about when it comes to lust and doing bad things because of it is the other guy on the team, of course, Mr. Contingencies. While he's like I've explained, he's super at being a hero. He does have that part of his cover as Bruce Wayne, because supposedly Batman is the real Bruce Wayne and Bruce Wayne is the cover for Batman. Bruce Wayne has a laundry list of girlfriends and ex-girlfriends and people he has hooked up with and all of that. And so he can act in a certain way when it comes to those. When it comes to DC, obviously, the figure known on Marvel's side is, of course, this guy, who's also known for being a, how did he put it in the Avengers? Playboy millionaire, philanthropist, who brags about the scores of women he has been with despite having a girlfriend, longtime girlfriend, and even wife, I think, in the MCU. And another very known, very popular character when it comes to that is, of course, this guy as well. I know in the MCU and in most of the big screen adaptations, we don't really see the amount of women that Spider-Man goes through. We know the big ones with Betty Brant, Mary Jane. You got Zendaya's character. In MCU, you have so many from the comics. Silver Sable. Funny enough, at some point, these two also had a thing. She went on a date with him. It's interesting. And, you know, a certain side of people comes out when they are trying to find the person that they want to belong with. And there's way more to tell here, of course. But that's a lot of stuff that makes it interesting to know in case you're writing something. Because one of the interesting things to do when it comes to an archetype like an Antihero is to play in on the opposite of things. And like I've been saying this whole time, villains and heroes are very opposite of each other, and playing in on that gray zone can make for some interesting characters like the ones I've been talking about. And I feel like that is a good place to end here. So thank you very much for listening and watching to me talk about this specific archetype and where it can lead to. And I hope that this helps for anyone who wants to see this kind of content when it comes to these kinds of characters. So this is a good place to end, say again. And okay, I feel that I can leave you now with this kind of information. So before I go, you can like this video. You can also subscribe to the channel if you like for this kind of content. You can also share this with friends and family or friends or people or colleagues at work. You can also type away in the comments if you like. But do keep it friendly and polite. And I will see you hopefully in another episode of the FWX podcast. And I will see you in the video then. See ya.